So thanks everyone so much for coming to listen to our talk with Fleur Hassan-Nahoum. She's one of the most inspirational speakers that I've ever had the privilege of listening to. And I really hope that you guys enjoy the talk today. Fleur is the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem in charge of international economic development and foreign relations. And she's also a founding member of the Israel-UAE business panel. So a really good person to talk to when it comes to the Abraham Accords and the future of relations in the Middle East. So Fleur, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. How are we doing? Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you all. And I know that we're all going through a really, really difficult time. And because I have family outside of Israel, I know that ironically, sometimes it's worse from outside than it is from here, because here we're kind of all into action and we're all doing things and we're all so involved with our everyday war effort. And meanwhile, it's my family in outside of Israel who are like crying in a ball in bed. So I get it. And I want to say that these are the moments when we understand what many of us already knew, and that is that we're one family, and that we're one people, and that when one part of the family hurts, everybody hurts. And I think that this is a horrific way to be reminded, but we are reminded, and the Jewish people have gone through this for many, many, many hundreds of years. And unfortunately, it rears its ugly head again and again. The difference is that now we have a country and we have people fighting for our country and for our people. And so if that gives us a modicum of some type of better feeling, I hope that it does. So I'm not quite sure what exactly you want me to focus on, but I can talk a little bit about what's going on here in Jerusalem right now, what the feeling and the mood is in the country in general. And then I always think it's much more engaging when I'm just answering questions, either from Annie, the host, or any of you, that we can open it up and have a proper discussion. And I want you all to know that everything's on the table and you can ask me anything you want and nothing will offend me. And I've got a few skins thanks to my political career. So I'm good with anything that you want to talk about, okay? So Jerusalem at the moment, this morning we woke up to some terrible news. There was a stabbing incident in one of the gates of the old city. A 16-year-old decided to take a knife and slash two police officers, one a woman police officers in critical condition. And we pray for her recovery, and the other one was less injured. And just reminds us that, that Jerusalem, even though at the moment we've become, first of all, it's been the quietest city in terms of rocket fire, because the Hamas have thrown rockets, and that horrible morning of October 7th, when there were 5 sirens in Jerusalem, that's when I knew something really bad was happening, because we get maybe one a year every 2 years. We've had them, but it's not like those poor people and who've raised children running to the shelter for 15 years. It's a rare occurrence. So ironically, even though Jerusalem in a way is a powder keg of emotions here, in terms of the fact that we have 40% Muslim population in the city, and that we have all the Temple Mount issues coming up every Ramadan, but also during the year, and that we've had all the Sheikh Jarrah property issues. With all of that, we've actually one of the safest cities in the country at the moment, and therefore we've become a city of refuge. What does that mean? There's now 250,000 evacuees in the state of Israel. It's almost incredible that I'm even uttering these words. From the south, everybody who was in the war zone and its radius. And from the north, today we've had 30 Katyusha rockets being thrown up north. And a week ago, the government asked people up north to actually evacuate. And so Jerusalem, the Dead Sea, even Eilat, even though there was another rocket thrown by the Houthis, how random is that, to Eilat, all these kind of touristy cities have become cities of refuge for the evacuees. And in the city of Jerusalem, we have over 30,000 people. We have 70 hotels. And I myself are running, I open and run a program to house evacuee families in luxury apartments of rich people who have empty holiday apartments in the city. I've had so many good people opening their doors to evacuees. There's a lot of empty apartments in Jerusalem because a lot of families like to have their own place here, as they do in Tel Aviv. But I've asked them to open their homes in Jerusalem. And so we've placed tens of evacuees in these homes. And so we've been busy with a kind of social services nerve center where people can get anything they need, from clothes to hygiene objects, to baby nappies, to baby formula, to clowns that we have entertaining the kids. We've set up makeshift schools in each hotel. And so Jerusalem's busy trying to accommodate and trying to welcome and host these families who, most of all are just deeply traumatized by what's happened. Many of them have had family members die or been taken hostage. Many of them don't know the fate of their family members. And so there's a lot of healing that we're trying to do in really very difficult circumstances. So that's where we're at in Jerusalem at the moment. In the whole country, as you know, at the moment we have the open wound of the hostages that we are. I mean, I can't tell you how livid we all are about this. We are in pain. There's no other way. A friend of mine's son has been taken hostage. Another mother with a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old who's become my friend since the crisis. And as a mother myself, I just can't bear the pain to think that could be my child. And I think that everybody feels that way here and abroad. And now the extra pain of having our soldiers who are kids, they're 19, 20-year-olds, at your age, they should be getting drunk in university. And instead, they're out there fighting for their country and losing their lives. And so that's another huge wound that we're experiencing. We're kind of, every day is a re-trauma of this October 7th. And of course, dealing with the brutality of those attacks. It's just like, I said to somebody today, and I don't want to, I don't want to offend anybody with this. And of course, it's not the same in scale, but I feel like we're going through our own little mini Holocaust, and just a taster of the horrors that people went through. We've just gotten this little episode of it, and it's just, I mean, I think we all have our good days, our bad days. I wake up some days and I'm very down, and I wake up other days and I'm like in fighting spirit. I'm going to show them today. And so we're all going through like the stages of grief, which, as a psychologist friend of mine told me, they're not linear. They come and go. And I don't think I'm the only person. I think that we're all going through this kind of trauma. And I believe that the Jews around the world are too. You guys have got the added stress, of course, of living in the diaspora and having hundreds of thousands of people calling for all of our destruction, which is, I guess, a trauma that you're all going through right now. And I mean, I don't know how you guys feel. We'll talk about it soon, about whether you feel your government is protecting you, police is protecting you. I've heard mixed things, and what that means for diaspora Jewry in general, when we have this kind of unbridled, unleashed, we're not even pretending it's anti-Zionism anymore, anti-Semitism. And of course, you've got your whole episode in the UK with what's going to happen for Armistice Day, and if the police are going to allow it or not. And that, I think, is deeply traumatizing, not just for Jewish people, but I think for the whole of the UK. I think people are waking up and realizing that they actually have a problem on their hands, and it's not just our problem. Fundamental jihadi ideology is not just our problem. We're the first line of defense, but it's going to be everybody's problem. And that's why everybody, and I think your leaders understand that. And that's why Sunak's been so supportive. We've got Boris here this week. We've had, the foreign minister, your foreign minister secretary, Cleverly. So we've had a lot of support from the UK government. We've had a lot of support from the US government, and other governments from Western countries around the world. And I think these governments understand that they could be next. And so it's in everybody's interests that they stand with us and that we win this war and that we eradicate at least in Gaza, we eradicate this kind of Muslim Brotherhood fundamentalist jihadi entity that really wants to destroy not just the state of Israel, but all the Jews around the world, and turn the whole world into a caliphate when you either believe in their sick and backward ideology or die. So that's, I guess, relating to what you guys are going through. And for those of you who are in university, it really can't be fun, because it wasn't fun for me when I was in King's College. I'm aging myself now, between 92 and 95. That wasn't even the beginning of the campus anti-Semitic rhetoric. It was going on, but at a very kind of low level than what it is right now, and that was bad enough. And so I can't even begin to imagine what some of you must be going through. And I, like I said, we're all one family, so I think we're feeling each other's pain. In terms of the ground assault, look, I have no doubt we're going to win this. The question is not we're going to win this, we're going to eradicate them. Of course we are. There's two main questions. What is the price we're going to pay? And are we going to be able to bring our hostages back? And if we don't bring our hostages back, or a good large part of them, this is going to be a festering wound for many, many years to come. And I don't know how we're going to cope with it. I really don't, because we've had the trauma of 1, 2, 3 hostages there for many years. But having that scale and the women and the children. I want to say that on one positive note, I spoke to a very high up person from the, I guess, intelligence establishment, and there is hope that at least the women and the children and the babies, somehow a deal will be cut. There is some hope. I'm not sure if you can trust these people to make a deal, but they said to me there's hope. It's not completely a lost cause, and so I'm hoping that the positive prognosis comes true, and I pray to God every day that we have an Entebbe type of miracle here. We have good technology. I just said something wild today, that they found a way to kind of fill the tunnel with this sleeping gas so that we don't kill our own hostages. We just put everybody to sleep and then we can get them out. I'm praying that some miracle, some creative, bolt of lightning helps us get back all our hostages. And I think that's uppermost on most of our minds every single day, as well as, of course, our soldiers and the wonderful work they're doing there to liberate us from this existential threat that is in our southern border. Things are hotting up north now. I don't know whether some of you followed Nasrallah's speech, which everybody's very perplexed about, because on the one hand, he's like threw Hamas under the bus. On the other hand, he's saying that he's ready to attack. So nobody really knows what he wants. I think he actually wants attention. He's a bit of a sideshow in all of this. But things are hotting up north, and people are being evacuated from places like Metula, where a person died yesterday, an Israeli died yesterday from a rocket attack. So let's hope we're not faced with a multi-front war. Let's hope that all the different warfare equipment and ships that America's sending and the UK have sent is enough of a deterrence to keep these people at bay. And I think in general, the world, the Western world, the civilized, modern, free world has to come up with a plan for regime change in Iran, because until that happens, this is not going to end. And so we should really, as a long-term strategy, have nothing less in mind than getting rid of them. The first people that will be so grateful to us will be the Iranian people, that we will liberate from this genocidal, misogynistic, homophobic regime that has basically had them hostages for decades. I mean, it's no coincidence that the Iranian people in the diaspora are the people that are standing with Israel at this time of crisis. They know who's behind all of this. They know what toxic ideology this represents, and they are standing with us, and we should stand with them when all this is over. So I think I'm going to stop there and let you guys ask me whatever you want, unless you have specific direction you want me to talk about.
I have a few questions that people have sent in advance. I only have about 5 or 6, and then I guess we can just open it up. The first question is comes from a student who says, I understand that Gaza is not occupied by Israel. due to the withdrawal in 2005. How can I respond when people tell me that the control Israel still has over the airspace trade and sea space amounts to a type of occupation?
Okay, that's a great question. And that's a question that I was getting the first week in the press. Now the press has moved on to dead babies. But the first week we were talking about this false concept of open air prison. So first of all, it's not a prison because they also have a border with Egypt. It's just that Egypt doesn't want them because they don't want terrorists to come into their country, which is understandable. And in fact, Israel opens its borders to Gaza to bring in all sorts of supplies every single day. In the last 3 months, when we thought things were quiet, we granted 20,000 work permits for Gazans to come into Israel. Unfortunately, our kindness was rewarded with brutality and massacre, because a lot of the people that actually came in that horrible day of October 7th were people who had been working in a lot of these kibbutzes, who had been skulking out the place, taking notes, and providing intelligence to help with the attack. So there's Israel outstretching its hand for an economy that we had no hand in breaking, because Hamas, with one tunnel, they could have built schools, hospitals, provided jobs. It's a place where 80% people living under the poverty line, 50% unemployment, and that is not Israel's fault. That is the fault of the government of the Gaza Strip, which is Hamas. So for those of you, just to give you a little bit of the context, Israel left in 2005 in a hope that the Palestinians would take this autonomous territory, which is beautiful, by the way, with an amazing coastline. It could be Herzliya, it could be Dubai, and they turned it into Beirut. We left them our greenhouses because there was settlements, 10,000 Israelis. We had to pull out Jewish Israelis from their homes. Now, for the Jewish people, this is a very traumatic thing to do. For Jews to pull out other Jews from their homes, imagine how that played out. I watched it on TV. We were crying when this was happening, not because we didn't believe in that we needed to do it, but because we were crying to seeing people taken out of their homes. And that's what we did for the chance of peace. Now, the deal was that, of course, we're going to control our border the way that every normal sovereign country controls its border. But because when Hamas took over in 2007, brutal takeover from the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, they first of all killed all the Fatah people in the Gaza Strip. All the Christians left the Gaza Strip because they understood that a genocidal Islamist regime was coming. And they started throwing rockets. Now, if a country or if an autonomous territory, which it was, starts throwing rocket onto a sovereign country, we have to be concerned about where those rockets are coming from, or where they're getting the capability for the tools for their warfare against us. So what we did was blockaded the sea, because we knew that Iran, we actually caught a massive ship full of essentially weapons of destruction. And from that moment on, we started blockading the sea, again, for our own self-defense. They didn't lack for anything. Food came in, and unfortunately, concrete came in, because they were telling us that they were building, and of course, they were building tunnels. They got aid from the entire world. They got through Qatar. They got aid from Iran on the side for their weaponry. They got trained. They got, guidance. They got everything they needed from Iran. And Egypt actually kept a much more closed border than Israel did. We brought in children to Israel for medical treatment that they didn't have in their hospitals. Again, they didn't. It's not that they didn't have the medical treatment in the hospitals because of us. They didn't have it because of them, because their government, their corrupt genocidal government is in charge. And so the Palestinians have to make a choice. Do you want autonomy or don't you? If you want autonomy, then you're in charge of handling your people. You're in charge of providing healthcare, food, and everything else. And if you're going to be a bellicose autonomous territory to your neighbor, then do you expect your neighbor to let you kill us? And so a couple of answers. A, it has two borders, one with Israel, one with Egypt. Egypt's border was tighter than the one that Israel had, where we let in people in for medical care, we had business. we let in trucks, and we brought in people to work from Gaza. That's the first thing to say. Second thing is 250,000 Gazans have left Gaza in the last 15 years. Does that sound like a prison to you? And so you can just hit them with facts. And the fact is this: the reason why we controlled the sea is because they were bringing in weapons to attack us. In the end, they ended up bringing the weapons through tunnels through Egypt. And Egypt's border with them has been much more closed, less flexible, less humanitarian than the border that they've had with Israel. And Israel is giving work permits, and they use that work permits in order to gain intelligence, attack us, and kill our children. So that would be my answer to that.
Thanks so much for that. The next question is from someone who said, one of the most controversial and difficult things to defend for me are the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. What are the arguments for them? Why are they necessary? And why should we defend them?
Okay. So first of all, again, let's go to facts. 94% of Palestinians are living in the Palestinian Authority territory. 94%. What does that mean? Area A. Area A is all the big cities like Ramallah and Nablus and Jenin. That's all run by the Palestinian Authority. Area B are the towns and villages around Area A, and Israel has kept security control, but there's no occupation in the sense that we don't run their lives. All we do is have a presence there to ensure they don't kill us. So when anybody ever talks to you about occupation, you can say to them, we don't want to rule them, occupy them, govern them. The problem is that their current government in the West Bank is corrupt, and in Gaza is genocidal. And so for our own self-defense, we have to keep security control of Area B, less so of Area A. We have security coordination with the Palestinian Authority in Area A. We have a bit more security control in Area B. So what is the controversial areas? It's Area C. The Israeli settlements are in Area C. Now, under the Oslo Accords, Area C was left to final negotiations. In other words, the Palestinians understood that the big settlement areas were not going to be uprooted. And let me tell you why it's not good for us to uproot our settlements, is because our settlements are in the highlands of Judea and Samaria. And again, the reason we need those highlands is because it's really the only guarantee that we can protect ourselves. If tomorrow Gandhi came to rule all the Palestinians, everything in Area C would be up for discussion. Unfortunately, we don't. We have Saddam Hussein here. And so the problem is that we can't leave our security, well-being, and defense in their hands. And the settlements are a strategic, they are of strategic value, not just because these are the land of our forefathers, which is a big enough argument, Judea and Samaria, Jews are from Judea, not just for that reason that we have that attachment, that there have been Jews in Hebron for centuries. Forget all that for a second. It's because strategically, if we keep those settlements, we have a guarantee that Gaza is not going to happen right here in Jerusalem. Because all you need is one rocket from the West Bank on Ben Gurion Airport, and the state of Israel's economy is destroyed forever. So we can't afford that. We can't afford one rocket on Ben Gurion Airport. And that's why the settlements are a strategic asset for the state of Israel, not because we want to rule anybody. We wish they were autonomous. We wish we could have an autonomous region in Area C. We wish we could perhaps have some type of arrangement with Area C. But unfortunately, they have proven incapable of governing themselves at best, and at worst, they have proven that all they really want is destroy us and not their own state.
I just have one more question, and then I guess we can leave it up to whoever wants to ask. My question is more related to anti-Semitism, but what do you think that we can do about the very few but very loud anti-Zionist Jews at the moment who are raising their voices against the state of Israel?
I don't think there's anything you can do. Honestly, I would just not waste my oxygen on them. They are They've got Stockholm syndrome. I don't know how else to describe it. There were Jews like that during Nazi Germany as well. There were Jews like that during Nazi Germany as well. No, they're fine. Yeah, no. It's at some point when they were dragged somewhere, then they changed their minds. But for the years of the anti-Semitic laws, there were Jews who, for some reason, didn't see it. And so those Jews are actually the people like Hamas laugh at them because they know they're tricking the world. And I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that this has awakened some of those. Not all. You still have your hardcore communists and whatever. The ones who don't feel an affinity for their people, don't bother with them. Don't give them oxygen. Don't waste your time. Just ignore them. They are nothing. They have chosen to side with the people that want to destroy their people. They just can't see it yet. They still think that they're fighting social justice. You know what? Either somebody else, I heard so many Holocaust survivors speak over the years, and one of them said to me once, I wasn't much of a Jew, but Hitler made a Jew out of me. And I always think about that. Either they'll learn the hard way or they'll just remain out of the tent. We have to reinforce our tent. Let's not bring in poison to our tent. Are we opening this up?
Yes. Dan, I can see you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you very much, Fleur. That was very insightful and great to hear you speak again. I have a question about how we got to where we are now. On the Israeli side of things, I think a lot of us are extremely disappointed, not just with the Netanyahu side of things, but also just how the security apparatus on what should be the most well-defended border Israel has failed in this way. So do you think you can shed some light on that for all of us?
Yeah, for sure. So listen, the first, I would say 2 days, we were all in shock. We never thought this would happen. And in fact, I wrote an article, ironically, the week before about the Yom Kippur War and how far we'd come. And, the polemic in the week of the Yom Kippur War anniversary, which was a few days before, the English anniversary was just a few days before, or even the day, something really ironic. The polemic was, could this happen again? Could we have another Yom Kippur War? And the consensus was, no, we're in a different place. We're stronger. Our intelligence, our tech, couldn't happen. And obviously, a lot of things failed at the same time for this to have happened. Now, sorry, there's still mosquitoes in November in Jerusalem. Now, I think there's a number of things. I think that, I know they've been planning a big attack for a long time and they failed. So it's not like they haven't been aspiring to do something like this for 11 years. They have. And that's why they built this entire tunnel network. And some of the tunnels that we actually ended up sealing or destroying were tunnels that were found that were going into civilian areas. So they've been trying this for a while. And in the end, they didn't have to take a tunnel to go into the civilian area, to just somehow brought down a $5 billion fence, and nobody, I don't understand what happened. Nobody does. Now, there's a few things we can say. I think the enemy is smart, and I think they saw a country in disunity. They saw a country where people were, saying that they don't want to serve. And I'm not making political statements here or there, because I think everybody's to blame for the disunity. I'm a very moderate person. I'm on the center right. And I think that some judicial reforms were needed, but not in the way that they were done, not in the way they were presented. And it shouldn't have gone this far. It was ridiculous. Okay. And so I think that the enemy is not stupid. They see a country like this. When I moved to Israel, it was 2001. It was the middle of the second Intifada. And the second Intifada happened resulting from the very generous peace offer that Ehud Barak had given to Yasser Arafat. And instead of taking the peace offer, and today they could have been celebrating 22 years of Palestinian statehood, they decided to start an intifada. either to get more or because he actually didn't want a state, and they don't want a state. They just want to destroy ours, right? And I remember at the time that the analysis was Arafat thought that the Israelis got too used to the good life and they wouldn't fight back. And I've got a feeling that, again, that the enemy saw that this was an opportune moment because Israel looked like a divided and weak country. And so I think it's a combination of screw-ups. I don't think it helps that, the government wasn't gathering the security cabinet so often because they had some unsavory people that they didn't want there. And it was just, everything was so seeped in politics and seeped in bipartisanship that I think that something got clouded. And of course, there must have been some technical screw-ups as well. It's not one thing, I always say that success has many mothers and fathers and failure is an orphan, right? Failure is not an orphan. This was a big failure and there are many people responsible. And the day after the war is over, there will be a national inquiry, there will be investigations, and I think a lot of political heads will roll. But the thing right now is that we can't focus on that because we have such a mammoth task ahead that we can't bite each other to pieces now whilst we're in the middle of a war. So I can give you my kind of defense. I'm not a defense expert, but I can give you my analysis of what I think went wrong without, of course, giving you the defense steps that it had to take for this to fail so badly.
Thank you.
Someone's just texted me a question because they don't want to speak out loud, but I think it's a great question. So they said, how can Israel truly uproot Gaza, Hamas? If Gazans support Hamas, how will we make sure that the younger generation don't rise up and create a new Hamas?
That's a good question. I will say this. The reason why the Palestinians in Gaza, well, first of all, they have, I would say, 40% support, okay? It's a lot of people who know they're corrupt, who've suffered by them, whose kids have been killed by them, whose kids have been radicalized. There's some decent people in there, okay? Now, the reason why it's such a radical place is because their educational system, which the whole world pays for through UNRWA, ironically, through a UN organization for the Palestinians, is teaching hatred, glorifying martyrdom, inciting, and is obsessed with the right of return, which essentially is the end of the state of Israel. So the West and their funding of the education system of kids has got a lot to answer for this as well. I don't say stop funding schools, but I say fund schools in condition that the curriculum is something that is not teaching hatred and killing. And so I think that the day after Hamas, there has to be a new order. And the new order has to be that any aid given, well, whatever government is established, has to be carefully monitored by the international community, including some of the Arab countries. And I think that the educational system has to change. The rhetoric in the media has to change. They have to make a decision. Do they really want to govern themselves? Or do they just want to destroy Israel? And I don't think they know what they want yet. I really don't. And I think that the West just imposes its own liberal values to people who are not there. And so I don't know what's going to happen the next day. There's a lot of theories being flown around right now, having some type of protectorship, international protectorate with some leader that they will pick, with conditions and with aid for reconstruction on certain milestones, lots of different ideas. I've got to say, I don't trust any of the UNIFIL. Look at in the northern border, they're the first people to run off when there's a sign of trouble. They're completely unreliable and weak. So I don't believe in international troops, but I think if there's an international coalition to fund and reconstruct Gaza, there should be some very clear milestones on what a new Gaza could look like and how you get that and how you end up getting that.
There's a couple of hands up. Alexei, if you'd like to ask a question.
I was wondering, I've just seen on the news, like I've seen on the news recently, there's been an uptick in extremists. Like I don't believe it's all settlers, but I know there are some, who are some violence, thuggery, and I've seen there's an uptick in that. Do you think the IDF should be doing more to sort of like maintain law and order in Judea and Samaria to stop an escalation, to at least reduce the chances of an escalation in that region?
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, we don't tolerate. We have law and order. We have courts. We have police, and we don't tolerate violence from our own people towards Palestinians, and we shouldn't. But let me tell you that the incidences they are to be condemned, but they are, I think, blown out of proportion a little bit. Yeah, there are thugs. Yeah, these are mainly kids who just like vigilante attitude, and it's despicable. But let's not turn it into a bigger monster than it is in order to justify. That's what the West does in order to say, oh, well, there's violence on the other side. You can't compare. You really can't compare. And yes, I think the police should do everything that it can. It's the army because it's Judea and Samaria rather than the police. But yeah, we should do everything in order to stop these type of things. And we should also crack down on any type of yeshivas that teach this type of ideology.
Thank you.
There's another question from Devon, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, hi. I had two, but the first one I think is shorter than the second one. The first one is the Israeli government expecting a change in the status quo as this war goes on and when the war is finally over, or are they kind of expecting it to calm down for a few years and then Hamas will come back up with more power and then we just kind of get used to rockets again?
No, we're not there anymore. The 15 years of paying protection money through Qatar to Hamas to buy quiet for a year and then rockets, and quiet for another 6 months and then rockets, those days are over. This massacre, brutal massacre, is the final straw. The people of Israel will not stand for it. Plus, even strategically more important, nobody will move down south. For people to go, and the minute the certain areas of Israel start becoming uninhabitable, we've had it, because that's exactly what they want. They want to make the whole country uninhabitable. And so we have to go back to those communities in the north and the south. And the only way people are going to go back to those communities is if we destroy Hamas. And there's national consensus. There's not one voice in this country, not one voice saying, no, let's just, teach them a lesson and we can live with them again. It's over. It's over.
Thank you very much. The other questions I wanted to ask is, why is the settler movement still being encouraged with things like subsidies and like government acceptance when we have the strategic positions in the highlands that you were talking about, and it ends up taking away IDF personnel from more volatile borders in order to protect the settlers from West Bank violence?
Well, listen, I think, again, let's not other the settlers. They're Israelis, they're Jews, they're our brothers and sisters, okay? And many people consider Jerusalem a settlement. And so we have to be very careful how we relate to people who are essentially our brethren, and they're in our country and in areas where the government put them and developed. Now you can get into the politics of the fact that there's a coalition government with Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and they were pushing for more West Bank protection. But let me tell you, in the last year and a half, there's been a lot of West Bank violence against us. I mean, I don't have to tell you about poor Leo D losing his wife and 2 daughters. They were just driving. What were they doing? And so there was an uptick in violence in the West Bank, and there were reasons to also feel that the West Bank was dangerous, in the sense that Hamas and Fatah hate each other, right? And the reason why the Palestinian Authority don't want an election is because they know Hamas are going to win. And Hamas is getting stronger in the West Bank, and as they get stronger in the Judea and Samaria area, it becomes a bigger threat to Israel. So I'm not saying that the decisions were correct. Again, I'm not a military expert. They certainly should not have left the border so unmanned the way that they did with Gaza. I mean, that's the biggest mistake of the history of the state of Israel. But let's not kind of try and find our own scapegoats. We can find our politicians as scapegoats, but let's not find the settlers scapegoats. That they're us and we're them.
I have a question. You spoke about the education system in Gaza, which UNRWA supplies. Obviously, it's funded by much of the international community. And then we're also speaking about destroying Hamas, which from my understanding, it's not only a movement, but it seems to be an ideology amongst the people of Gaza. How do we go about this campaign to destroy Hamas, while at the same time ensuring that there won't actually be a generation that comes up having suffered the trauma of this war, as opposed to it actually being something that they've learned in school?
Well, you can't, can you? I mean, we didn't ask for this war. We didn't ask to be attacked on October 7th, and any sovereign country would go and destroy the poison that has created this terrible suffering. We're in a terrible situation, yes. My only hope, like I said earlier, is that a new power structure comes into shape where children are taught to love, not hate. And look, we also have a lot of traumatized children in this country. And so we have to hope that at some point a leader will arise that actually cares about their people. They have not had such a leader ever, Palestinians. And we could hope that maybe not this generation, but at least if we set the structure in place, that the next generation are different.
Thank you. There's another hand up from Grace, if you want to ask your question.
Hi, thank you for being here. I wanted to ask about Israeli Hasbara, so-called. You lived in this country, this country being the UK, you understand what's going on here, and you see how many people are in the streets, on Saturdays every week. And that's not just the Palestinians, that's a lot of other groups. And I just wanted to ask, Israel invested so much in Hasbara, so-called, all they talk about is Hasbara, but clearly there was a failure. There was a failure to understand what's going on in the West, I think. Do you agree? And do you think that the Israeli side would needs to align itself? Do you think that would happen? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I don't think that they've spent anything on Hasbara. I don't. I think part of the problem we're in is that nobody's taken Hasbara seriously in this country. And that's why it's left to good organizations like StandWithUs to do the job that the government should have been doing. I think the joke of this whole thing is that the Hasbara minister, resigned after 4 days because she was given no real authority to deal with it and very few budgets, and people were criticizing her. And I think actually she did the right thing. She said, well, you're not giving me the authority. I'm supposed to be the Hasbara minister. Hasbara, the problem with Hasbara has been that everybody, that it's always been siloed in this country. And so you've got the foreign ministry, you've got their Hasbara department. Then you had an Hasbara ministry that nobody knew what it was supposed to do. Then you have the diaspora affairs and fighting antisemitism ministry. It's about everybody being the king of his castle. That's what it's about. And nobody is really thinking about Hasbara, A, and B, with all due respect, they appoint Israelis who have no idea what Hasbara even is, because they don't understand the English mentality like I would, or the Spanish mentality like I would because I speak Spanish, or the American mentality like some of my friends would. They don't get it. And so, again, this is a big failure of the country. Everybody's doing what they can. The way that the army is well funded, we should have one central command that works with civil society organizations like StandWithUs, doesn't see them as competition, creates a coalition. That's always been my dream. to create a coalition so that we can be on the same page and fight the same war, not everybody shoot in a different direction. So yeah, I'm very critical of the government's complete lack, and not this government, every government, a complete lack of understanding what Hasbara is, how to deal with it, how to use Israeli AI technology, which we're so good for, how to use all the ammunition we got, because we are fewer people than the 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. We are much fewer. And so how do we use our allies? What do we do? Who are allies? How do we get more allies? Nobody's thinking strategically like that. And I agree with you. So no, not a lot of money has been poured in by the government. And that's shame. That's a shame. And this is why, look, having said all that, I'm not sure whether a great Hasbara campaign can stop anti-Semitism, which has been raging for hundreds of years. Don't ever, let's not blame ourselves for the fact that people hate Jews. They do. And like Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said, anti-Semitism always grabs on to the trend of the day. So 500 years ago, Jews were Christ killers. It was a religious hatred. 100 years ago, Hitler, Jews were ethnically inferior. That was the call of the day, all about race. And today it's about collective, it's about national, it's about, calling us a colonial power because that's what's trendy. But make no mistake about it. Anti-Semitism is a mutating virus that picks on the woes of the day. When communism was the enemy, Jews were communists. When capitalism was the enemy, Jews were capitalists. We're anything that people want to hate. So yes, we have to be critical. We have to up our game. We have to be more coordinated, but there's always been anti-Semitism and there always will be.
Thank you.
I just have 2 finishing questions. So unless anyone else has any questions before me. But my first question is, I know that you have been instrumental in the Abraham Accords with the UAE. And I was just wondering, what do you think the future of Israel-Arab relations is with these countries?
Well, look, at the beginning of this, I was actually very impressed that a lot of Arab Israelis came out saying, not in my name, I'm no longer Palestinian, like Naz Daily came out, it's very impressive. A lot of Arab Israelis were so incensed about what had happened. My friends in the Gulf kept calling me up, are you okay? My friends in Morocco. So there are promising signs that people see us as people, especially those of us who've developed deep relationships in these places. This is not going to derail the Abraham Accords. It's not, because the Gulf countries, you have to understand, they kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood about 10 years ago, and Saudi Arabia started kicking them out in the last 10 years. So they are acutely aware of what we're facing, acutely aware. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see that I interviewed a friend of mine from the Gulf, and he says, we know these people are ISIS, and we know who ISIS are. And so they're acutely aware. But of course, they've got this kind of rhetoric of brotherhood that they have to keep up. So I don't think the Abraham Accords as a whole has been derailed. I think the peace that we were kind of working towards with Saudi Arabia has definitely been delayed, and it will be delayed for a while, but hopefully we'll get back on track.
Thanks so much. My second question comes from another student, but they've said, how important is global perception of Israel, and how much does the UN condemnation actually matter? How much does it matter what people think of us on university campuses or in the wider field?
Well, I've got to tell you, I think university campus ideology and rhetoric is essentially the problem of the country that they're in, not ours. I mean, for me, it's a problem because I care for you guys and you guys are there. But it's essentially a problem for the country. The only thing that matters to us is how public opinion in these countries affect the leadership of the countries. And as long as the leadership of the country understands that it's not electorally bad for them to side with Israel, we're okay. And so I think that, in fact, with the whole Armistice Day mess that you guys are facing this Shabbat, I think it's actually made the Brits wake up and say, hey, we don't want this. And so I think ultimately this kind of unbridled anti-Semitism might actually work against their cause. You know, they can't pretend it's anti-Zionism anymore. It's the cat's been let out of the bag. The horse has left the stable. And I think that ultimately that's not good for the pro-Palestinian cause, especially these, I mean, most of it is an anti-Semitic cause, really. The left-wing crazy liberals, you know, I think they are really just anti-Semites. The ones that we saw, you know, from the communist movement that wanted to kill Jews. It's the same type of people. And again, most of those people, when reality hits them, when they're a bit older, they've left university, they have to get a job. And all of a sudden they realize that it's Jews who have to give them that job, or they have to relate to people who are not of their ideology. Some of them grow up and some of them will remain haters. Again, don't waste your energy on the haters. There's 15% of people who hate us. There's 15% of people who love us, and everybody in the middle don't care. Or they just get affected by whatever stupid hashtag Bella Hadid or Gigi Hadid or those idiots have come up with that day. Those are the people that we need to convince. It's not the haters.
I have a question. So you're speaking about not focusing on the haters. Unfortunately, it feels like within Israeli society, for the last few years at least, there's been this extreme hate within Israeli society between the Israeli left and the Israeli right. Some might even say Israel's one of the most anti-Semitic countries in the world when it comes to, you know, how the left might treat the right, who are traditionally a bit more religious. Or maybe that's even racism within Israeli society between Israeli Jews and Arabs, and how they might not see Arabs as being part of the land or as part of the future of the land. So my question is, what is the next step going forward to reconcile Israeli society, to bring everyone together, especially after such a tragedy happened?
Well, I think that I think this has taught us the worst way to learn a lesson, really. And it's silly because 80% of Israelis agree on 80% of things. They really do. The right and left today is not about Palestinian state or not a Palestinian state anymore. It was not about that. It was about the character of the state of Israel, religion and state. How does that play out? Haredim, their role, that type of thing was what was dividing us. And I think that if one thing, this is things that when you see hundreds of Haredim voluntarily recruiting to the army, you think, bloody hell, why did we have to get to this, you know? I don't know. Israel is not going to be the same after this. It's not going to be the same. And I'm at least hoping that if we're not going to be the same, we're going to be better. And we're going to understand that tearing each other apart will just, you know, tear the country apart, will just give our enemies, you know, that entry point into destroying us. So let's hope that's what it does. I mean, it just seems so stupid that on Yom Kippur, we were fighting over a mechitza in a public place. Shame on us. Shame on us.
Thank you so much for all of your answers to our questions. I think
Thank you guys. You're fighting the good fight. Remember to be proud of who you are. We're an incredible people. We're the only people on the planet that has survived the way that we've survived, with persecution after persecution. Bigger people have tried to destroy us and failed. Talk about the Roman Empire, the Babylonian Empire. Okay, so we're not going anywhere, and you have to see what's going on today in the context of history. And we're a very special people that everywhere we've been, everywhere we've settled, we have contributed, we've been productive, and we have advanced societies. Okay, and we are the only people in the planet Earth that have solved its own refugee crisis after the worst genocide that the world ever saw. So be proud of who you are, be proud of the chain that you represent, and we will overcome. There's a lovely expression in Hebrew that I use, and I mantra to myself, Gam ze yavo, this too shall pass. It will.
Thank you so much, Fleur. You're such an inspiration to us in the diaspora, and I think your voice really matters to us.
Thank you,
So
Judy.
thank you.